Hey, welcome back to another episode of the SEC Sports Guys. I'm your host, Hunter Ames, joined here with Jason Lee, Lemansky Flakes, bringing you everything that you need to know in the SEC. First, guys, we're going to start with the SEC Championship. LSU, Georgia, this past Saturday. Game televised on CBS. It looked like Georgia came to play, at least for the first half. LSU pulled that way ahead, made their statement, headed to the national championship game now, winning 42-10. Lemansky, break it down real quick for us. What happened to Georgia? They played for at least 2 quarters of football, but what happened into the second half? What were some of the mistakes they made there in the first half?
Well, one mistake they made is they left a lot of points on the field. There was some numerous opportunities for touchdowns, but they set up for a field goal and they set up for a missed field goal, resulting in no points. And the onside kick, that really did, give them momentum with the crowd, but they failed to score. And another point to make, they were very one-dimensional offense, and going against a team against LSU, you're not going to beat them doing one thing. You have to perform both. And they had 40 pass attempts to only 15 rush attempts, so you're not going to beat a team like LSU passing it or running it, just doing that. You have to do both.
Okay. Looking at LSU on the other side of the ball, they seemed a little sluggish in the first. I know last week you talked about that nerves would be playing a factor in this, and they were a little sluggish in the first, but I don't know what Les Miles exactly said to them at halftime, but it worked, and they pulled out, and they pulled out way ahead and completely dominated Georgia in that second half. Break down that for us.
I think LSU really showed their depth against Georgia in the championship game. I did say last week I thought they would come out a little sluggish. To be honest, we don't know how much they had to play for. They could have been in the BCS National Championship regardless, win or lose. But they showed their depth in the second half. They just kept playing. They wore down Georgia. If you will watch LSU previous games this year, the national championship coming out, you're going to see that defensive line rotating in 3 and 4 guys every play. So they're always fresh. They got 8 guys that can play on the line, and they're just going to wear you down, and that's what they did to Georgia. And then they also showed that Tyrann Mathieu is probably the best athlete in the country right now. May have even put himself in the Heisman picture. I doubt he's going to win it, but it maybe got an invite to New York. And lastly, offensively for LSU, they just kept running the ball on Georgia. They said, we're just going to keep running the ball unless you stop us. 4 tailbacks got carries, led by 4th-string Kenny Hilliard had 2 touchdowns. Blue, 3rd-string tailback, had 2 touchdowns as well. So four touchdowns coming from backup running backs. That just shows the depth took over there in the second half.
All right, good deal. Again, Georgia, 42-10. Georgia will be making an appearance in a pretty decent bowl game this bowl season, and LSU, of course, going on to the national championship. We'll go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, we'll be taking a look at the SEC versus Big East Challenge, as well as the big Kentucky-North Carolina game.
Welcome back. Changing gears now to talk about some SEC basketball. Had many big games for the Southeastern Conference this past week in the basketball arenas. Big highlight matchup is Kentucky against North Carolina. The other highlights with the whole conference was the SEC Big East Challenge, where the Big East took on the SEC. All teams were playing against each other there. We'll get to that in a second, but let's start with the showcase. Lemansky, tell us about Kentucky and North Carolina this past Saturday.
Well, Kentucky and North Carolina was a matchup between 2 top 5 teams, Kentucky being number 1 and North Carolina being number 5. And being the fact that Kentucky had the home field advantage, it proved wonders for them as they could rally back to defeat the North Carolina Tar Heels late in the game. And Anthony Davis, the freshman for Kentucky, had the game-winning block with 3 seconds remaining to seal the victory. And I just felt that proved wonders and propelled them to the victory.
Now, that was the big showcase. Kentucky with a big win over North Carolina. Kentucky being the top-ranked team coming into the game is going to keep that number 1 ranking in for another week. It is early in the basketball season. Football's still been the conversation. The conference games will start in January, but key non-conference games this week was the SEC Big East Challenge. All 12 SEC teams were in action against the Big East. The Big East won 8 of the 12. The 4 SEC games winners were Ole Miss over DePaul, Kentucky over St. John's, Mississippi State over West Virginia, and LSU over Rutgers. We'll have much more as the weeks progress with the basketball. As we said, conference games start in January. But Ames, let's talk about a couple local teams. Let's go with Alabama. How have they done so far this year?
Head coach Anthony Grant is bringing in Alabama. They're 12th currently in the country. They're coming off a big win at the Puerto Rico Challenge tournament, so they're set and they're poised to have a pretty decent season.
You know, Alabama was a team last year who barely got left out of the NCAA tournament. In fact, they got selected for the second-tier tournament. The NIT made it all the way to the championship. Conference decided to make a lot of changes there. They took away the divisions. There is not an East and a West anymore in the SEC. It's just one big conference there, and they're looking to get more teams. Lemansky, let me get to you. What do you think the lack of divisions will do for basketball this year?
Well, I think it will do wonders because it will get a chance for more teams to go from conferences to the NCAA tournament. Because like last year, SEC had very few teams, and this year they have a chance to get more teams in the national tournament.
Ames, let me go to you. We just saw the SEC championship. LSU defeated Georgia, and now Alabama has, and we'll talk about the BCS in a little while, but Alabama has gone up to number 2 to get into the national championship game. Let's say football makes this change like basketball. What would that have done to this controversy coming into the BCS? Would it have made any changes to football?
I think it would eliminate a lot of the problems because you would have had more teams playing in a playoff system. Now, of course, they couldn't do it like basketball does with so many teams that we would just go straight into the playoffs, not even play a regular season. But I think a playoff would definitely help with the college football situation. Many thought Oklahoma State should have been there. Some were saying Oregon was playing great late in the season. Stanford might have had a shot, but we'll never know because we have to go with the system that we have right now.
Now, we mentioned a local team, Alabama, and how they're doing, Anthony Grant's team there. Let's go to one other local team and come back to you, Ames, with the Auburn Tigers. How have they looked early in the season?
They're still building the program. They're definitely making improvements. Tony Barbie's in his second season. They're 6-1 on the year, hoping to make much improvements from last year's.
That'll do our segment here for the SEC basketball for this week. Again, much more basketball as we get along. Still wrapping up football. Going to get into the bowl games. The SEC teams and conference games will start up in January, like I said. When we come back, we'll look at the BCS plus the bowl picture for all SEC teams involved.
Welcome back to the SEC Sports Guys. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the BCS standings. This time we're not going to run through the entire list because it really doesn't matter. At number 1, LSU, number 2, Alabama, and number 3, Oklahoma State. Now, with the rankings coming out between Alabama and Oklahoma State, we knew there was going to be controversy either way they picked it. If it was Alabama number 2 or Oklahoma State number 2, there was definitely going to be some controversy at hand. So let's go ahead and let's talk about some of those. The computers, Lemansky, had Oklahoma State coming in at number 2. And Jason, the human poll had Alabama coming in at number 2. Let's take a second. Let's discuss that. Why do you think one system had one team at number 2 and then the other at the human polls had Alabama at number 2?
No doubt both teams have an argument. And what it comes down to is the computers have no bias. The computers see who you play, how much you beat them by, and that's what they spit out. And they definitely thought that Oklahoma State had the better resume. More ranked opponents, we'll get in that in a minute, but Oklahoma State, especially that last game against Oklahoma, a blowout, they looked impressive. The humans, on the other hand, and we could talk about this in a second a little more in detail, but the humans voted by conference. You had SEC coaches voting Oklahoma State 4th and 5th in the polls just to make sure that they would drop down. You had Big 12 teams trying to do the opposite. So the humans are definitely biased. And the other thing is the factor besides the BCS is the coaches. And these coaches are playing football every Saturday. They don't get to watch all the teams in the country. So I'm not sure that they're the best ones to be voting to put somebody in the BCS anyway.
You know, I honestly think that the human poll was kind of already decided before we even played that Big 12 championship. Finished out the season for Oklahoma State. It was kind of already decided. I don't think if Oklahoma State would have beat Oklahoma, but 120-0, it would have even made a difference. They already had it made up in their mind that Alabama was getting that number 2. And you're right. The computers don't have an opinion on things. They just spit out the information that they're given, the data that they're given. So we'll go. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Well, what I have to say is the voters, the humans, they go on, like they know the SEC is more dominant. So I guess that's where they give the upper hand to Alabama because they're playing a tougher conference, and the Big 12 isn't really known for the defensive prowess. So that's where the BCS and the computer rankings don't really have an impact. They have the impact on the statistical outcome, but the humans have the eyes and they can see with their eyes that the SEC is the dominant defense, and Alabama has been going through the dominant defenses, whereas Oklahoma State has gone through.
Okay, well, is it a matter of fact or is it a matter of opinion in this case? I mean, is it what other people in the sports nation think, or is it what the facts state? Is it the data that's presented? I mean, which way are we going on
the
this?
The fact is, the SEC is the most dominant conference. So if you go through the SEC with only one loss, I mean, that's self-explanatory. I mean, the SEC is the closest thing to the NFL, so you have to take that in consideration.
You know, and I said earlier about the coaches, how I wasn't happy they voted. A couple examples here. Nick Saban voted Oklahoma State number 4. He obviously did that on purpose. We all know that Oklahoma State's at least 3. He obviously did that on purpose to drop them down. Finkel, head coach at Missouri, he's currently in the Big 12, which you think he would have a bias towards Oklahoma State, but he voted Oklahoma State number 5. And if you think about it, Missouri is the newest member of the SEC. So there was definitely some of that going on. I blame the coaches a little bit, but you also got to blame the system. This is the system that we have. This is the most aggravating thing. And the BCS is sitting back, the BCS committee is sitting back laughing at us right now. Because you know what? We're on here talking. There's sports media everywhere on here talking. But what's going to happen? When those games come on, what's going to happen? We're going to watch it. And they know that. They know that. And so that's part of the plan. So I blame the system. I'm not blaming the two teams. I'm not going to blame the coaches too much. I blame the system.
Well, you pointed out, they said that we're going to watch it. How much of the nation outside of the SEC do you really think is going to watch the national championship with just being SEC? I know that game will be sold out. Alabama and LSU fans will fill up the Superdome. But how many people outside of the SEC are actually going to watch this game?
Well, I think that's why the BCS made the championship game the last game. Everybody knows that this is our last chance to watch college football for a while. So you're definitely going to get everybody to watch it. That doesn't mean they agree with it. I'm not happy with the rematch. But if you look at it and you break it down, the two best teams are playing. Now, does Oklahoma State have an argument? Yes, they have an argument. But in the end, the two best teams are playing. I'm not happy about the rematch. We've already seen it. We saw what happened. In fact, Alabama lost at home. That's a big factor to me. But in the end, if you matched up Alabama and Oklahoma State, Alabama's going to win that 9 times out of 10.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Oklahoma State, they had more wins against ranked teams. How do you see that size up?
Well, they had more wins against ranked teams, but you also have to figure, you know, since ESPN owns the Big 12 license or whatever, most games that air on ABC and ESPN in the primetime slot are from Big 12 schools. SEC does not have that. SEC has CBS. So most of the voters and the media, they attract to ESPN and ABC. So they will see that and vote them up from what they've seen. And it's kind of a biased opinion, you know, because the preseason polls, et cetera, and they're so biased. And just like Oklahoma, they were preseason number 1, and they got dominated last Saturday. So, you know, the human polls is just favoritism. That's in my opinion. And I mean, they beat 7 ranked teams, but you also have to take into account that those 7 teams are, you know, aired on ESPN and ABC regularly, and voters are.
So you're saying that those 7 ranked teams maybe weren't worthy of their rankings?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So a Texas A&M, a Texas, K-State, and Oklahoma were not worthy of their rankings?
Well, Texas A&M, you know, they lost to Texas a few weeks ago. Texas is not really, you know, that dominant of a team. And Oklahoma, they started off the season number 1. You saw how they played last Saturday. They played like a, you know, unranked team, honestly. And really, just the polls, in my opinion, it's just a popularity contest. And another point, if Oklahoma, you know, if they were number 3 in the BCS, I think Oklahoma would have gotten that. But since Oklahoma State, it's not really that popular. You know, they get the short.
Popularity is going to win the contest. Okay.
Popularity.
We talked about Oklahoma State with Lemansky and some of the teams they played. Well, let's break down who did Alabama actually play this year that made them worthy of that number 2 spot.
Now, it's a fact. Alabama only has one top 10 win, okay? And their best non-conference win was Penn State. But what you got to look at is Alabama can't help who's not good and who's not bad. They make these schedules 4 and 5 years in advance. Alabama couldn't help that Auburn was down, who won the national championship last year. They couldn't help that Florida lost their 2 starting quarterbacks, had to play a 3rd-string quarterback against Alabama. They couldn't help that. If you break it down, they're still in the best conference. They did not make it to the SEC championship game, but they still had only one loss. They played everybody they were supposed to play and won, with the exception of LSU. They can't help who is ranked and who's not ranked and what their records are. But if you look at the beginning of the season, there were 5 SEC teams in the top 10. 5 SEC teams in the top 10. They're not in the top 10 now because they've all played each other. They've all beaten each other, put each other out. So Alabama can't help that.
And another note, in the beginning of the season, Alabama blew out Arkansas. A few weeks ago, they were ranked number 3. So that shows the strength of the ACC. And I believe a team like Auburn, who had a down year, they could move to the Big 12 and win 10 games with this year. That's how strong the ACC is.
Well, you made the point that maybe Alabama couldn't help that the SEC was a little down this year. Well, couldn't you make the same point for Oklahoma State in the Big 12?
You could a little bit. And that's why I said I'm here talking about Alabama, but I'm clearly not happy with the rematch either. I'm really just picking a side here, and it goes back to the system. The system is flawed. The system that we have is absolutely flawed. You've got, as we talked about, ESPN bias. You got coaches bias. It's a flawed system. I think we would all love to see Alabama and LSU play each other, Stanford and Oklahoma State or Oregon play, and then let's smash the winners up against each other. So I'm not fighting clearly for Alabama, but the system that we have asks, who are the 2 best teams in the country? Let's play those for a championship, and I believe those are the 2 best teams.
Okay, Lemansky, the SEC has won 5 of the last BCS national championships. Do you think that had anything factoring into this an Alabama-LSU?
Honestly, I do. Because some voters, they're very persuaded by certain media outlets. ACC is going to attract more audiences, more money, and more, sponsorships or whatever. And I think that played a big role, but at the end of the day, it also, played with the reputation. The SEC is more dominant, We take them. More money, more attraction, more publicity. Take the ACC team.
Thoughts?
Well, let's also look at this. The Big 12 is in a state of chaos right now. The commissioner was just fired a few weeks ago. We have a new commissioner. How much did the new commissioner go out and publicize for Oklahoma State? We know what the SEC has. We know that the commissioner is out fighting for them. So did a lot of voters say, okay, well, let's just put the SEC team in because we know they're the strong conference. They have won 5 in a row. Well, we know they're going to win 6, but they probably also looked at it and said, is LSU that much better than everybody else? Can Oklahoma State give them a game? And I think that's what a lot of people said is Oklahoma State can't give them a game. So we know what Alabama can do. They went into overtime. It was a close game. So I think the conference definitely did play a factor. And the Big 12 and not knowing what's going on there and how many teams you're going to have next year maybe played a big factor in that.
All right, last thing I want to discuss with you guys, non-conference champion being invited into the national championship. Thoughts on that one?
It's funny, Nick Saban back in 2003 came out himself and said nobody who does not win a conference championship should play for the national championship. And I agree with that. However, the team that was in the way of you playing for the conference championship is the team that you're going to be playing in the BCS. So me personally, I'm going to let Alabama slide here. I still think at the end of the day, you've got to say who's the best 2 teams in the country. And I think they got it right here. The system's flawed, but I think they got it right.
It just goes back to what Nick Saban said back in 2003. The BCS is not made on, coach's past quotes. The BCS system is built to get the 2 best teams together. It doesn't matter about conference championships and all that. It's just the 2 best teams. And I think we have the 2 best teams. Although the system is flawed, me personally, I would rather see a +1. But, they have the 2 best teams, Alabama and LSU.
You think we got the 2 best teams?
I really do. Do.
Okay. All right. That is it for this segment. When we come back, we'll break down the bowls for the SEC. We got 9 teams in the bowl games for the SEC conference. And so we'll see you when we come back. Welcome back to the SEC Sports Guys. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the 9 SEC teams represented in the bowl games. We're not going to break them down completely. We're going to save that for later shows in the next couple weeks. First game we want to take a look at is the Franklin American Mortgage Music City Bowl. Be played in Nashville, Tennessee. It'll be played at LP Field. It'll be a 6:40 game on ESPN on December the 30th. Features Wake Forest Demon Deacons against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Lemansky, give me just a little bit about this game.
Well, both teams coming to the matchup 6-6 with a 500 record. And Mississippi State, they're kind of a down year because they were expecting so much more. And I think Dan Mullen will have his team ready for the matchup against Wake Forest.
Okay. All right. Next game we have is the Chick-fil-A Bowl. It'll be at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, Georgia. This is a December 31st game, 7:30 on ESPN. Auburn fans will be bringing in the New Year's in Atlanta. They'll be playing Virginia Cavaliers. Virginia had a pretty decent season this year. They'll be facing off against the defending national champions. What do you have, Jason?
I think both teams are looking for a rebound here in the bowl. Both teams played their rival the last game of the season. Both got blown out. Auburn and Alabama. Virginia Tech beat Virginia. Virginia's 8-4. Auburn's 7-5 coming in. Both teams looking to rebound. I think it's going to be a good coaching game as far as getting the young guys ready to play. Virginia has 15 underclassmen who are going to start. Auburn has 21 who are going to play in the rotation. So it's a matter of use this month to prepare. I think both teams will be very interested to see what they get out of the young guys.
All right. Taking a look at the next game, the Outback Bowl played in Tampa at Raymond James Stadium. That's a really cool stadium, by the way, with the pirate ship. Michigan State Spartans will be taking on the Georgia Bulldogs. That game is on January 2nd at 1 o'clock on ABC. Lemansky, how do you see this one playing?
This is a very intriguing matchup. Michigan State and Georgia both have very talented defenses and very talented offenses when they're clicking. And I just feel like it's a great matchup because they match up so well together. And Georgia is looking to bounce back from that terrible loss to the LSU Tigers in the SEC title game. And I think this game will be a great game for the bowl season.
All right. Taking a look next at the Capital One Bowl. It'll feature South Carolina Gamecocks and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. It's played in the Florida Citrus Bowl. It'll be on January 2nd at 1 o'clock on ESPN. Jason, tell us a little bit about this one.
Just as we said for the Chick-fil-A Bowl, this is two teams that struggled late. Steve Spurrier early in the year looked like he had the Gamecocks going to the SEC championship, folded there at the end of the season. He's had suspensions. He's kicked players off the teams. He has injuries with Lattimore. He needs to get it turned around here. We don't know how many more years Steve Spurrier has with the Gamecocks. So looking for definitely a bounce-back game here as well.
This next one I like the name, the TaxSlayer.com Gator Bowl. Boy, we're getting really nifty with our names for bowl games. It's going to feature the Ohio State Buckeyes against the Florida Gators. It'll be played in Jacksonville, Florida, much of a home game for the Florida Gators. It'll be at Everbank Field, January 2nd at 1 o'clock on ESPN2. Lemansky, what do you think?
Well, this matchup on paper has the meanings of a soap opera. Florida, Ohio State. Urban Meyer used to coach Florida. He got hired by Ohio State a few weeks ago. He won't be coaching the game, but I'm pretty sure he'll be on the sideline. And the game will be in Florida, so it's going to be a lot of headlines for it. But I see Florida and Ohio State, they both premier programs, but they had a down year. But they both have very talented defenses, and I'm looking forward to this matchup.
All right. Next is the AT&T Cotton Bowl. We feature the Kansas State and Arkansas Razorbacks. It'll be in Arlington, Texas at Cowboys Stadium. That's a really nice stadium, by the way. Be on January 6th at 8 o'clock on Fox. How do you see this one?
This is one of my favorite bowl games. I love watching the bowl games at the Cotton Bowl in Cowboy Stadium now. Like you said, excellent facility. Kansas State was one of the ones, we talked about the BCS earlier. Kansas State had a legitimate argument for getting a BCS bowl. They did not. Virginia Tech got selected over them. So we're looking at a Kansas State team who's going to come out, who's going to be looking to get a little bit of respect. They're going to be ready to play.
All right. And the last one, and I'm going to let both of you talk about this one. BCS National Championship game featuring number 1 LSU, number 2 Alabama. Be played in New Orleans at the Louisiana Superdome. It'll be on January 9th at 8:30 on ESPN. Lemansky, we'll start with you. Just one point about this game. We're going to definitely break it down in a couple weeks, but let's go ahead and hear your thoughts on it right now.
This is a rematch of the game that was played in November. This time it's in Louisiana, so it's kind of like an LSU home game. And I'm just looking forward to this matchup. It's going to be a great game. And I'm just looking forward to all the playmakers on both teams, offense and defense, and I'm just looking forward to it.
2 points really quickly. Can LSU keep it going? They've proved all season long that the depth has been a factor. They have worn teams down. Alabama's going to be looking to make adjustments here and finish drives. They've moved, although it was 9-6, no touchdowns scored, they moved the ball pretty well on LSU the first game, but now they've got to finish the drives, whether that's field goal, the field goal kicker making the kicks, putting the ball in the end zone. They're definitely going to look to finish off this time.
All right, I'm going to bring in one more thing. I know we're going to break this down. We're going to spend probably 10, 12 minutes in a couple weeks talking about this game. One more thing I want to bring into it. How do you think this preparation time is going to be? They get like a month and a half to get ready for this game. Give me one thing on how do you think the prepreration, is it going to help Alabama? Is it going to help LSU? Is it going to hurt one of the other teams? What do you think?
I think it definitely is going to favor the offenses. As we know, we had a 9-6 game. Offense moved the ball on both sides, but they just couldn't finish drives. I think the offense is going to take a look at the defenses. I think a lot of people put Alabama and LSU in this game because they thought they had the two best defenses in the country. So it's really going to be good preparation for the offenses to take a look at the film from previous game, see what they could do differently to get a few more points here.
How do you think this time off is going to be for
The
them?
time off is going to improve wonders. You know, both teams have played a grueling schedule in the ACC, and by giving a month off, they have a time to rest their bodies and heal, and also preparate for the game. And they have two of the top coaches in the whole nation. You know, Nick Saban and Les Miles, being the great motivators and the great game planners that they are, they will come up with a great game plan for the matchup. So.
Thank you for joining us on the SEC Sports Guys, and we'll see you next week.